Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of UFO Man Live. Today, we are streaming at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, because we have a very special guest. His name is Yossi Ronen. He hails from just outside of Tel Aviv, Israel. They're 8 hours ahead, so we had to facilitate him being live. So that's why we're earlier today. Anyways, my two co-hosts are Tom Reed from Tennessee and Rob Heatherly, who is muted.
Not anymore.
Rob Heatherly from the Ozarks. Tom, introduce yourself.
Tom Reed. I'm a co-host with Tim quite often. I have the UFO Park in Massachusetts. Our case was the first in the United States to be deemed historically true by state government, and I held a couple of conferences here and there a year, UFO Expo, and just very happy to be part of Tim's show.
Thank you, Rob. Introduce yourself.
Basically, just a researcher that has a very keen interest in the topic, and have met a lot of interesting people, fascinating people, and very much enjoying getting to know new people such as yourself and the fellowship that comes with this, exploring this together, trying to figure this out. So
Thanks for coming and being here. Our special guest Yossi is an author and a first-hand, face-to-face ET contactee. So, Yossi, tell us a little bit about yourself and how this whole evolution process started, how you came from someone that didn't know much about ufology and the ET phenomenon into having this experience. Can you start from the very beginning?
Yes, first, thank you for inviting me.
You're more than welcome.
The contact happened when I was 21. I went to my brother's small business that he had in Los Angeles, in the Valley, and I went to work with him. I never before heard about, I heard, but I didn't have any interest in UFO or something like that, or not, I didn't explore that in any way. It happened very suddenly, and after 2 or 3 months that I lived there, it happened in a daytime, when we went back from work to the apartment to rest. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. My brother went to rest in his bedroom, and I was resting in the living room. That my bed was next to the wall, and I fall asleep with my face to the wall. And it begins with that I suddenly find myself out of my body. And it was the first time that it happened in my life. I saw my body sleeping on the bed, and it was a very good experience. I felt very peaceful and happy, and very amused by the experience of being out of the body. And in that second, it was the first realization that I'm not only the body itself. And it was very important for the continuing of the contact, this understanding that I'm not only the body itself. So in that situation that I was like wandering above the bed, I saw those creatures for the first time in the room. There were one standing near the bed, near my head, looking at my body, looking at my head. And there were three or four in the room. They were walking in the room, touching things in a very curious way. And I look at them. I didn't have a form or something. It was my like awareness of looking at the room and at my body. You can call it pure consciousness, maybe. Uh, and I felt very good with them. It seems that in that minute, that I know them in a way, like a very old friend from childhood or in the past or something. And we were communicating without talking. And we were very happy to see each other, like. And I was looking at the one that was standing near my head on the bed, and I was very pleased with what he did to my body. And it was a weird relationship. I was looking at my body, and it was like looking at, in a funny way to see the body that. Okay, and then I knew that I'm going back to the body again, and I woke up from the body, looking at the wall that I was facing with, and I woke up from a weird thinking of a dream that I had of 4 or 5 green creatures, and I am out of my body, and I'm looking at them, and they looked very weird. I didn't see any pictures of UFOs or aliens then. It was 81. There was no internet or something like that. So I was thinking to myself, what a weird imagination I had, that I was dreaming this kind of creatures. I thought it was a dream because I didn't heard about out of body experience then. And I didn't. I did not. I did not. I thought it's a dream. I didn't realize that it was an out of body. I thought I was dreaming that I'm out of my body, looking at my body. So with my face to the wall, I heard a noise in the room, and I got a little bit tense because I thought maybe a thief came to the room, because I felt a little bit scared or something. So I turned around and sat on the bed and I looked to the room, and then I saw that the same one was that in my out of body experience was standing near my bed, was looking at me with his big black frightening eyes. And the others were standing there in the room looking at me too. And I felt the most frightening feeling that I had in my life. It was like I started to be paralyzed from fear. I didn't understand what I'm looking at, because I remember that I dreamt about them, and now I'm awake. I pinch myself to be sure that I'm awake and I'm not continue to dream in a weird way. I realize that I'm totally awake, but I see what a second ago I saw in a dream. So the first thought that was, maybe I got out of my mind. It was too weird to realize that. And if I didn't go out of my mind, if it's true, it's even worse, because these creatures was not something similar to anything that I saw in my life. And they had a very strong influence on me because I felt that they like looking at me and they can hear my thoughts. They can feel my fear, that they are very much stronger than me. And those thoughts and feelings made my fear even stronger. I was totally paralyzed and I didn't know what to do. And I think from maybe I didn't have any other choice but to try to relax the fear was the thought that a minute ago we were laughing together. And I felt strong love from them. I felt that I knew them and they were good. So I tried to stop the fear for a minute and try to look at them from the same point of view that I was in the dream. And in that second, my fear began to be lower. I started to realize that I know that they can feel me and know my thoughts because I know them, because the communication is neutral. The same way that I can hear my thoughts, I can hear their thoughts because that's the way I know that they are aware of my thoughts and fear and feelings. And that make my fear a little bit lower. And I started to be aware of our connection. And the connection was not, it was telepathic, but it was not in the way we think about telepathy. The way we think about telepathy is like communication of sending thoughts and receiving thoughts without speaking. But it was different. It was that because of our connection in our consciousness that they let me share their consciousness, I could communicate with them. And the thoughts that I have in my human thinking that it's words is my translation to the communication. It's not that they are speaking to me in the words, but I am translating the communication in my words, in Hebrew. And first of all, it was amazing feeling to experience their consciousness because they were very, very quiet, very innocent. I didn't felt any ego because of their superior and wide consciousness compared to me. I didn't sense any threat from them, and they were very open and to each other. I mean, their communication with each other was in the same way of connecting to each other, and they were like one, but not one brain. Each one of them has his own personality, and he was different from the others, but they were totally open to experience the other emotions and thinking. And maybe you want to ask me before I continue the experience?
Sure. I have a question for you in regards to what you saw when you saw them. What was the distinct color? So everybody in the chat room understands what you saw. And how were the eyes in relationship to the common sightings of almond-shaped eyes? What were the eyes like on the being then that you looked into the face of?
Well, the visual of them was the same in the beginning that I was out of my body and looking without my eyes, and then the same thing they looked to me when I was woke up and looking at them with my physical body and brain and eyes. It looked the same. Only when I was out of my body, the details were more HD, like much more. Uh, the visual was much more wider because I looked because the visual was not only from the eyes, it was from very it was much more wider, but I cannot express or say in words what it was, because now that I'm talking from my limited brain, I cannot express it in words. But they will
Okay.
look much more wider.
It was like it was very vivid, where you were not only seeing it, but you're feeling it and sensing it also. And more of a rich, like a lucid dream, but you're totally immersed in it.
Yes, yes, yes. From out of the body, everything was much more vivid, much more detailed. It's like the sound and the visual and the smell and the feeling and the thoughts are helping each other to experience what I see, and that's why the visual was much more richer.
So you're saying when you're back in your body, your experience was limited.
It was comparing to that was limited, but what because they let me go and experience the reality with their white consciousness, I could experience them once again without the limits of the fear. What I understood is that the fear of the body, the instinct fear of the body, of the limited body, is limiting very much the visual or the understanding of what you see. Uh, and they looked very green and thin. What one of them was a little bit more fat than the other. They didn't have any hair. Their eyes like in the picture, small holes like nostrils and small and holes from instead of ears. No hair, very long fingers, very gentle like skin, not smooth skin and not smooth green. It was spots of yellowish or rusty color on the body. But their eyes were very, very intense, like it's a small, I don't know how to say it in English, the black needle that we have in the eye, the black thing, it was like their eyes were only that black thing without
Okay.
the white, without the white around.
Tom?
And
Yeah, I have a few questions. When you were having this communication, apparently, from what I understand, when you were more of seeing this from an all when you saw yourself as well, which was like a dream state, it was more vivid than when you were in reality. Correct?
yes,
Okay.
until the communication with them and the oneness with them,
Okay.
and in that oneness, it was vivid again. I mean, but through my body,
Okay.
and,
So
and that. Mhm, mhm.
when you had that, when you were back in your body, then and you had this communication, was it something that was like almost an English in your head? Was it like an Arabic, or was it something that was more visual? Or how did this communication, uh, when you were back in your body, how did you were you able to communicate back and forth?
Yes, the telepathic communication. I mean, the word telepathic is the most closest word, but
Hmm.
but it's not it's not a communication. It's not sending and receiving. It's to be one with, and then any question that you have in your mind, you get the answer at the same time. It's like that you choose to understand something in the ordinary way of question, and you have the answer at the same instance, because
Yeah.
it's like your mind is searching and finding in the same
Right.
minute.
They're
They
all
didn't
there's
have
the
to,
minds are connected,
yeah, they
right?
didn't have to answer me. I was my question touched the answer at the same minute, at the same time.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
So they were
there
just
wasn't.
open, like an open library. Just touch your question in the place
Okay.
that you want, and it's the
So,
answer.
so my second part of that would be when there were several, three or four around your bed,
Mhm,
correct?
mhm.
When
4 or 5.
did you ever see them speak to each other? Or that, and when they spoke or when you communicated in this way, did they happen to look at you or look away? Or was it, I guess what I'm asking, was there any body contact along with the thought process with you or with the other beings that were around your bed?
In that situation that I was sitting on the bed, there were no connection, body connection or something like that, and between them there was no need to communicate. They were observing each other experience of reality at the same time. It's like in a couple of computers connected to each other and have the data with each other at the
Transferred.
same time. Yeah, that like they are connected to each other.
Like a hive mind almost.
Yeah, and it was amazing because of that they didn't have any ego, because each one of
Right.
them knew the thought of the other one and know the feelings of the other one, and they are very open from that, and they didn't have any. It was so different from us, because I think if we for a second can be open to each other in the same way, we're
Full
gonna almost love each other,
full
because
transparency is what you're saying, right?
yes, yes, because much of our fears and bad feelings to each other is out of that wall that there is between us. We think about that he's lying to us, or maybe he's doing that to us, and we do lies and we do everything. I mean, these bad things to each other, because we are not open enough to each other. So in a way, they show me that me as a simple human can be open at the same way as them. It was not that they gave me a superpower that I had because of the communication. They just opened my simple human ability that is there. It was not something special. Mm.
Did you happen to notice any change in the barometric pressure or the around you? Did anything feel tighter or closer? Was there a feeling that came over? Was the room altered in any way, or your feeling? When I experienced what I did, I remember feeling like I was deep underwater for a moment, like everything was just muted for a moment. And I'm just curious if you experienced anything like that.
I felt at the first seconds of the contact, when I was opening my eyes and see them, the the contact was very uh, te- uh, com- my body was very unfamiliar with the communication. What happened that my body was totally paralyzed. I heard a noise like a train that is almost going to smash my head, something like that. It was a total fear, and my head like I was hearing noises and terrible feeling and experience. And as I lowered my fear, I realized that that noise and fear was only out of my body brain that didn't know how to translate the communication with them,
Okay.
because I was connected to them from the out of the body, and then when I woke up and I was still connected, and I don't know if I did it on purpose or it was an accident. Till now I don't know. But what happened that I was opening my eyes and I was still connected, and this connection terrified me because I was not using I'm not used to that. For me, this connection with them was like I'm drowning in something that's swallowing me. I didn't
Yeah.
know how to I didn't know how to grasp this oneness. And I think many of us that communicate with them have the fear because of that, because we in the beginning we cannot grasp this immense wide consciousness, and we are feeling that we are drowning in something bigger than us, in a force that is much stronger than us, and in so many ideas and understandings and colors and sounds that we are getting lost and we are afraid from that. And but it's only the beginning. If we can lower the fear, that the fear is the most the real wall that stand between our white consciousness that we have all the time and the regular consciousness that we have in the body. And the body, when it touches this oneness, at the beginning, he have to go through this wall of fear of being open to this oneness. And many people feel that they are, when they touch the oneness, that they become like such a small thing that they're going to be disappearing, and they feel the fear of death. Many feel the fear of death because for the body, this white consciousness is death, because the white consciousness of the soul is free only when the die and when the body is dying and is not limiting the soul anymore. So the body is afraid of that very much. He doesn't want that because it's like death for him. He is not he doesn't function anymore. So this is a very instinct, very old fear of the body.
I
And
think a lot. I think a lot of people, Yossi, have the fear of separating from the body because we don't know what lies beyond.
yeah,
So your explanation of becoming part of the oneness is a very good theory. Tom, do you have a question on that?
I was going to just ask if there was any orbs or spheres or anything else that might have accompanied or prior or just after the visitation that you had. And with us, we had I remember seeing like an orb in the room that was pretty defined. Then it would kind of slowly dissolve and then appear again. So I was just wondering if you had seen anything additional to the
uh,
visitors themselves.
no, no, I didn't see before in the out of body or after that. I didn't see anything like that.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Rob, what do you think about all this?
There was a couple things that struck me. When you talked about the out of body portion, that you saw with a lot more clarity, as your spiritual esoteric self. It seems that to me, what I was understanding is that the five senses were limiting your ability to perceive and view accurately the entire totality of what they were trying to convey, and it needed to remove you out of the body to see with the most clarity possible. And we've, science has shown that in DNA, trauma is passed down through generations instinctively as a survival mechanism in the physical brain. So, the two things that struck me with that is that removing you from the body removed part of that fear factor out of it, but also gave you a lot more clarity of insight on what your experience was to better effectively
Yeah.
communicate. And it seems like with their um, telepathic communication, it was like a person would be reminded of a memory that they search out. It wasn't in words or pictures necessarily. It was just, you just knew it. Rather, does that sound
Yes, yes,
accurate?
yes, exactly, exactly. And I think it was, I don't know if it was an accident. Is it was a miracle accident because that I had the contact in these two ways of consciousness. It gave me an understanding of myself in front of them in a much more wider way, because in the beginning I saw them like without the disturbing of them thinking logical, rational, and limiting five observable eyes and the
Five
brain.
senses.
Yeah, and then I saw the same. This I had the same contact from the body, and I saw the differences, and it made me realize one of the things that I think it's very important for us to understand, like the question of why we saw them in such a different ways, and why. Uh, I mean, there is a lot of complicity and mystery and so many different stories about these creatures. And I think the main thing to realize is that when in my contact, when I was out of my body, I had an experience that I know only after I go went back to the body, and now I remember the contact that was out of my body once again through my brain. What I mean is that all of our memories of the spirit and the out of body and the contact with the beings are memories that is now translating the like the superposition of our out of body from the brain through the position of our bodily brain translation. So that give a hint why if a contactee was in a deep fear in the contact and he couldn't get release of the fear, and then when he go back to himself and try to realize his contact in his brain and rational way of thinking, he have to translate it in a way that relates to his fear. So it gets a form. So it's a little bit complicated, but they like they like explained me that in a way that they told me that their essence is not physical, and when they come to us, when they came to my room, they gave the like the material gave a material body to themselves. And this material body was I saw it with combination of my brain translating it. So it's not only that they choose to manifest themselves like in this way or other way, it's combined with our personal translation in that same second when we meet them. So uh, we can see it in it's very related to out of near death experience, that many have this the same near death experience, and after in that experience, after you go to the tunnel and you meet relatives, or you meet angels, and you meet uh, heavenly creatures that say, talking to you and say you should go back. And and the thing is that if the person was like is uh, a Jewish, he remembered that he saw holy people from the Jewish religion. And if he was a Muslim, when he woke up and he talking from his brain again, from his conscious normal way, he remembers that he saw uh, heavenly teachers from his Muslim religion, and the Christians saw Jesus. So what I mean by that is that when we wake up from the superposition of the white consciousness that we have without the body, we have to translate it, and we can do it only with our own way of understanding reality. We don't have any other choice. The most holy thing that is in our consciousness, in our bodily living, if it was Jesus, when we go back to and wake up, we remember Jesus, because this is the most closest thing for us, that comparing to the feeling that we have in confronting this creature, this spiritual creature that was there. So for us, it's very complicated to understand how it could be and to understand what it means. But what it means that when we are out of our body, we are connecting to this oneness of everything. Comparing to our way of understanding, in that superposition of out of body and clinical death, we see the holiness. It is Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha, and they are all one there. They are all, but we have to translate it in a way when we wake up, and we give it a form. One can give it a form of an angel, and one give it form of an alien. And now this is not. It's what I'm saying with that. It's that what we saw is not imagination. We saw what we understand that we saw. But the thing is that we cannot understand that oneness. We have to limit what we saw in a certain way. And we limit it to a green color and thin body. And it's not imagination, it's the real thing, but we cannot communicate this all of that oneness at the same time.
Right.
So it make us confused. Why you say that you saw them like that? Why you say that you saw them like that? And we start to argue with each other. No, it's like that. Who said the truth? You said the truth. You lie. You understand? We get complicated and I think that in the time that we're going to hear more and more experiences, we're going to find that this experience is very related to our own personality. And if you are in a good mood, you can have a good experience. And if you are afraid and you are in a bad mood, or many other aspects can make your experience a bad one. And
Right.
it's only the memory of that.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I agree with it, with what he says immensely. I mean, I've always tried to look at why I was able to reflect or almost answer my own questions. Like Yossi said earlier, that it's almost right there, it's immediate. And so the way that I've tried to make sense of this myself, and I'd like to get your opinion on it, that we know from science that our brain gets older, it doesn't retain information quite as well as it does when it's younger, and so why our childhood memories are like that. Where we lived, the baseball game we had, these things that are forever embedded in our mind. So if someone asks us a question, where did you live, what color was your house, it's almost like right there, because it's so vivid, because it's deeply embedded in your brain. Whereas as you get older, the brain tends to deteriorate a little bit. So our memories aren't quite as good. Like, I can't tell you what I had for dinner last Friday, but I can tell you what my school looked like. And so where I'm going with this is that when you had your experience and you were kind of, like, I guess, questioning what was happening, but you kind of already knew. I'm wondering if these thoughts, or this almost what we refer to as a telepathic type of communication, is more or less embedded into your brain all at once. So it's almost already programmed or told to you. And so while you're there, nervous or unfamiliar, your body reacts to different situations because it's unfamiliar with what's happening. But you ask yourself what's going on, and all of a sudden because everything's already been planted deep in your brain. So it's almost like an old memory. So you're answering your own questions while it's happening in real time. That's how I understand this from my experience, which is somewhat similar to what you've explained.
Yeah.
But I kind of wanted to put that forth to you as a question as to how you feel about that.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is that I think we can go back to that seconds of this high consciousness, no matter what the reason is, because that seconds of white consciousness stays in our brain, and it is not influenced by time, because it was a seconds of connecting to the oneness that is not related to the past or the future. It stays there all the time because it's one. And one of the one of the like questions that I asked them, I told them, did you came from a different star? That was my first question to them when I saw them, because I used to think like, it's probably a creature from a different star. And the immediate answer was that they came from a different dimension. And in that answer was a lot of understanding that I'm still learning from that. One of the views of that answer, we came from a different dimension, is that the the dimension is not a different place. They say to me, listen, you translate the thinking of our weirdness, and you thinking we are probably came from a very different place. So the most different place for your ordinary thinking from your body is a different star. You cannot think about furthermore distance because you don't know about it. But we are from a different dimension, that it's not a different physical place. So now I after that I try to understand what they meant by that, because I understood the answer in a very experience. I experienced the answer, but I now try to understand it in a rational way. Where is that different dimension? Where is it? And the answer was that the different dimension is not a different physical place. It's like a different um, place in our wide reality of consciousness. What concludes like the all existence and reality is from our consciousness, and the consciousness can travel from our physical body and see the physical world, and there is other dimension to our consciousness. And we before the show we talked about this quantum field that is a very small piece of physical, like the subatomic, that is so small that all the particles there are in a superposition and not in a different places or different time. And you can say, and for me now, I understand it like this, that this quantum field is other dimension. And it can go much more wider and further from that, because this other dimension is related to our physical world in a very small physical area. And I understood that from the second that they went out of the room, I jumped in the contact experience. And what they did, that they left the room, they went to the other side of the room, they hold hands and started to go in a circle. That circle became to be very transparent and very fast, like holding hand with each other and moving around. And the circle, the moving was very, very fast and become small. And then it was so small that they disappeared. So they showed me how they go to a different dimension. And actually, other dimension was a very small place from the point of view of the physical understanding or my physical way of looking at things.
Rob, we were talking about that quantum field earlier. You're muted again, by the way. We were talking earlier about that quantum field and about the subatomic. I'd like you to go into that a little bit, but before you do, I want to make one comment. Yossi, I have a friend that saw something rather large in our reality, but at one point it shrunk down to what appeared to be a tiny little pinprick of light and disappeared. His assessment was the same thing that you said, that they were disappearing into a different dimension at a different scalable size. But when that hole reopened up, it got big enough to where he could see into it. And that dimension was totally different from our perspective of our reality. So everything could be different as well. So what I want to do is now send it over to Rob and have Rob comment on that.
You're talking about the aspect that we were talking about everything is quantum, the scalability.
Yes.
There's a lot of scientists that talk about how we may be witnessing a fourth dimension emerging into our reality when we witness craft and things that like you talked about, they could start out as a pinpoint and come and emerge into something large and digress back. Um, they could be scaling up from a subatomic level, um, and that we're all connected to this. They talk about pairs being quantum entangled, but a lot of what I'm researching and finding out, and there's some physics that backs this up, is that it's all quantum entangled omnidirectionally. Like he's talking about the oneness, everything is related and whole. And like with taking it out of the body, it removes the limited ability of the five senses to perceive the reality around them. And the immature mind needs the body to focus on to make sense of its surroundings. But as it matures, it doesn't need that physical reality as much. And in the quantum field, we're all entangled with organic and inorganic both. There's that capacity, like they were doing, to communicate these things that are instantaneously available, like retrieving a memory. Um, so that does make a lot of sense to me, where he's talking about that we are all one. We just don't realize it in our individualities. Just how interconnected everything is. That it's like a forest is actually one living entity all in itself that has a lot of individual components, but in essence, it's all one organic being in itself. Like you was talking about the hive mind and things, but they're individual parts of the whole. So, in the contraction of the space, if they eliminate the polarity differences of the positive and negative from the proton and the electron, you get rid of that space in there, then you become, those merge to become one. I think there's a parallel to be drawn with the two of the analogies that he's making with that.
So basically, the universe is alive as one big, gigantic organism, and we are just elements of that organism, whether you be in a different time or space, or a different dimensional reality, or even in a different multiverse. Tom, what is your opinion?
Well, Rob's referring to reversing the poles and this idea that we can adjust or change our size, for lack of a better word. And so, with that, are you also suggesting that it wouldn't just be an individual, but it could be a craft as well? So, if someone sees a craft that's 100 yards, theoretically, by removing the certain poles and the way this works, we could actually be the size of a pin head or something. And if that's the case, then we could even go further and say that we could actually have planets and galaxies out there the size of a golf ball.
That's
Correct?
entirely possible. Yeah. And most of all matter is actually mostly energy, vibrations, wavelengths actually that are not measured, that are in a superposition. And once you measure them, then they become a particle, so to speak. Like the electron is a field until it's measured, then it becomes it acts more like a particle. This oneness mindset, if you just observe instead of try to measure, you see it all. But the moment you try and measure it, it collapses into a particular point. You could have the craft that can be very small in scale when you're trying to measure it, but it I may not be explaining this right, but yeah, it could be it can work both ways. It could be of immense size, but scaling down to our scale where we can understand it and relate to it, or it's scaling up from a smaller
Sure.
Scale to our scale, to where we can see it and interact and not think that we're seeing a ghost or something that doesn't have any physicality tied to it to help us better
Adjusting its
it.
physical, adjusting its
Yeah.
physical. Yeah.
I know that scientists are starting to believe that perhaps some of the viruses that are out there are not actually earthbound viruses, but alien life forms that are so small that we can't see them, and their activities are causing what the problems are. Scientists are actually considering this theory. Go ahead, Yossi.
Well, what Rob said before, it's exactly related to the thing that with out of body experience and seeing the beings there, because in the quantum field we influence what we see with our consciousness, and our consciousness collapsing the wave function. What I mean by that is that in those experiences, the scientists see that the wave function of the light, for instance, is in a superposition, but when you examine it, it have to be collapsed to a certain place and time. It's just the same when we are in our superposition, when we are out of my body, out of the body in the clinic death, for instance, and we see those angels there. And when we go back to our body, we collapsing that oneness that we saw there to a certain angel or a certain being or grandmother. The main thing was that love that you felt there, immense love. But now you have to collapse it to something, and you collapse it to what you think is the most thing that is connecting to that love. And that why is the differences. And in the UFO field, it's, I think it's related to that the aliens doesn't like hide or show themselves in different ways. We see them in different ways.
I was going to ask you a question in regards to um, the universe being one. Um, with the universe being one and all the different sizes of beings, the funny thing is human beings look for ET presences that mimic what we look like, or an arm, two arms, a head, two legs, a torso. Um, Media has come across with the gray aliens, and the sometimes the praying mantis beings and the reptilians, but we really haven't gone farther to what we're talking about today with the subatomic and different dimensional reality uh, beings. Because, in my opinion, scientists have discovered several dimensions, and if one of them has life forms that are visiting here, it would explain a lot. Tom, I have a question for you. Could you show your mock-up of your alien head, please?
Sure. So
we can kind of compare it with what Yossi saw.
so that is what is in the Roswell Museum. That's the mock-up of pretty much what we refer to as an ant. It looked like an ant to us, and I just so happen to have a spare head that actually is in the Roswell Museum as well. And so this was actually made by an individual who went to the same college I did in Connecticut, and knew that I guess shared the same science room with him or what have you, and so he made this for the Roswell Museum. This is actually the backup to it, or the spare, if you will.
Show it from the front, Tom, so we can see it.
Oh, sure,
front.
yeah.
Yeah, look at the teeth on that thing. Show it up a little higher.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, yeah.
That's different from a lot of sightings, because usually the mouth is vestigial and doesn't have teeth. That one does.
Right. And the thing is, too, I was young when I saw it, so, and I was quite frightened. So maybe that's why, in having this made, my brother and I were when it resonated to us, that's when we said, yeah, you got it. But, we were pretty scared when we saw this. And so maybe that's why it kind of looks a little more frightening than maybe it needed to. But, so I'm open to that. But that's a pretty good, size of the head. It was probably about 4 feet high, and it had stick-like legs. It reminded me of bamboo. Mm-hmm. And I think that I actually have also just for your viewers, that's actually the mock-up of the Star Child skull, which I got from the from New Mexico. I'm sorry, from New Mexico. No, Texas. It was at a Texas museum, and of course the original came from a cave in Mexico, like Robbie talked about earlier. So that's what I have. Back to this guy. This actually is in the Roswell Museum. This is the backup to it, and I say that's pretty much the size. I the only thing differently, what I remember, this was a little bit more translucent, like a reddish translucent, like a fire, like an ant, a firehead of an ant. You know how it's almost, you can almost see through it. But anyway, so that's what my brother and mother and grandmother all saw on September 1st, 1969. I mean, that's the best marker.
Thank you for showing that. And Rob, you and your co-host Shannon Scott also worked on some photos from the Cumbergav's turkey sighting that was made famous on YouTube, and came up with a really clear photo. I'm going to put it up, and you could describe it.
Okay. Yeah. That was the craft in Turkey where they had it. In most images, it looks like two beings, but when it was enhanced and blown up, there were three. And his resolution, he was able to pull out, and some of it may have been an artifact of filling in the blanks with the software, but the essence of it is essentially what was seen, and that he enhanced it. He didn't add any features or take anything away. He developed what was already there to have more defined edges and things and balance. And I put a link in the private chat just a minute ago. Deep Prasad, I just realized where I saw that drawing that Yossi has made today, that they're very similar. They have the vertical eyes instead of the slanted eyes. If you can pull that link up out of the private chat.
I'll see if I can do that. I don't know.
Maybe I can. Let me see if I can.
Hold on a second here.
I'll try and put it in the chat.
No, just wait. I'll grab a screenshot and I'll put it up.
Okay. I'm technically challenged on that stuff. Sorry about that. But it just looks a lot like what he's describing.
Okay. I'm getting there. It actually does.
Prasad is this young scientist that had an experience.
Mm-hmm.
I heard his lecture. Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
There it is, right there.
That just does that seem anywhere familiar to what you experienced? Any aspect of that?
Yeah, the skin body, long fingers, big head, the eyes. Yeah. Very.
He said there was a tight one-piece suit, which was white, gold symbol. So that's different.
Yeah, I didn't see any clothes, and I didn't see any organs of a male or a female on them.
Right, and that's widely reported that there's no organs to indicate gender. We always think that every being might have that, but perhaps they do not breed in that way, or even breed. They might raise their offspring differently, or they may not even have offspring. We don't know. We're still looking into that.
Some reptilian organisms, or like whales, mammalian, aquatic, they retract their reproductive organs. So, they could be reeling it in, so to speak, or they could be like some have proposed that they're like AI instead and mimic an organic being, but they're not actually alive. They just have the impression of looking at it, because we know that the phenomena can manifest whatever it chooses out of thin air, from our perspective, taking energy and turning it into mass. There's no reason to think that they, if this is some sort of AI or they're using that for whatever process, it really doesn't matter. They're able to make something physical out of energy that would appear to us as magic out of nothing. And they can appear as a living organism of any type, but it
Right.
may not be, as we understand life, um, in its substance.
I think what one of the things that I saw that first of all, even we are spiritual beings that live in a temporary physical form.
Right.
So it's happening. I mean, and with them too, in the way that, if I understand right, what who they are from different dimension, and when they explained to me that only when they came here they have to be in a body, it means
Right.
that this body is only a kind of manifestation of them in a temporary time when they are here. And
So it's like a
and a minute
vessel.
up,
Yeah.
yeah, and a minute after that they become to be a light and disappear. So that's why I think that it's totally different. I mean, we don't have to think of them only in a certain biological way that we know from Earth, or
Right.
Hmm.
we imagine that going to be developed on other stars.
Can you, Yossi, explain what you saw when they joined hands?
Yes, they stand in a circle and hold the other hands tight, and they become a circle of like one physical circle with each other. What I felt, I don't know, what I now understand, that they were like joining their physical body together, and by their consciousness they started to go to different dimension, and they did it by, in a physical way, started to go fast, started to make us a very fast, like circling. Yes, very very fast, that they were so fast in that circle that it became light, that this light become transparent light, and the circle become one point of light that becomes so small that it disappeared from my eyes.
The faster something goes toward the speed of light, the smaller it gets. They could have sped themselves up to the point where they were no longer any
Yeah,
perceivable physical
yeah,
And
manifestation.
by eye. Yeah.
yeah. Maybe they like using these physical rules of going out of this physical limits, and we don't understand after that what's going on. We just understand what is happening in the physical world, and this is what we see. I mean, it's like connecting to the rules that we understand of, if something physical go fast, it becomes small.
Hmm.
Fast, close to the speed of light, it become very small physically, the same one. So maybe they, when they hear, they are influenced or manifest themselves in our physical rules, and that's why we can see them.
Well,
Yeah, if they,
that. Sorry. I was going to say real quick, that's what would explain why ships, when they appear, just go blip and they're there. And then
That's
blip,
it.
they're gone. And it would also explain why, when some people have abduction accounts and they're up close to a being and they see what looks like a tight fitting uniform, no seams, no zippers, no buttons, how that could have actually appeared on their body. It was like it manifested itself through
hmm
whatever consciousness was being used. because we can't do that. We don't have the ability to have something just appear like that. So what is happening? And a lot of these beings are identical. So if they're identical, are they just using these bodies? Now I want to reference the Travis Walton movie, Fire in the Sky. Now I know a lot of um, entertainment value was added, but in regards to that, they had alleged um, bodies that they put on for us to see them,
Suits. Yeah.
suits,
Yeah.
and that was alleged because I think that was entertainment value. But I do know it was based on other stories in the community that have indicated that there were suits as well to make them look different. Let's one other one I wanted to mention was Whitley Strieber when his movie was put out, which according to him was somewhat far from the truth. Um, some of the beings had these blue suits they put on because when they shed them, they were energy. So that
Yes,
would back up what you're saying.
yes, and Whiteley Strieber, his book was the first time that it was 5 years after my contact that I didn't talk about this contact to anyone. This years I had to, deal with that with myself. And when I saw this book, I almost fainted because it was the first time that I saw this face on a regular base in the bookshop on Tel Aviv in the middle of the day. It was very exciting. What I wanted to say, I forgot.
That's
Um,
okay.
The energy suit. The energy suits we were talking about.
Yes, that they can. I mean, he describes in that book that they examine him, and many tell the story of the episode in the experience of the abduction that they put like a drill into their brain and they examine them and a very violent penetrating to the body. Now, like we said before, if I take my experience in the beginning that I was afraid and I heard that noise of them trying to communicate with me, it felt like a violent entrance into my body before I realized that they're trying to communicate in a very simple way for them and very opening, trying to invite me to the oneness with them. But
that
if you are not if you are not open to that, you feel that like almost they rape you or they are trying to penetrate your brain or your so it
Your
can be.
psyche, yeah.
I've got a thought on that. If they existed, if they are non-physical, and or they exist at a much higher frequency and speed, the physical danger would be if they didn't slow themselves down enough and have to comport into a physical um, when energy in stages of rest translate into transcend into matter. They start staging down in their energies. It would make sense for them to communicate with you at your level in a physical body. They would have to slow their vibrations down of their atomic structure. I'm not not just talking in perspective of paranormal, but actual the physical process of it, the physiology. They would have to slow down their brain waves into the interface to where it doesn't over modulate and literally cook your brain like a microwave. And that would
Yeah,
instill a lot of fear until they can slow themselves enough to make you comfortable enough in your body to not feel like it's being attacked
yeah,
at a low enough frequency to interface with you without danger and be able to communicate effectively.
yeah.
Right.
I felt that they are very, very careful with us because they know that the communication in a physical way can be very overwhelming for us, and sometimes we cannot stand it, and it could be damaging for us. So
Oh, sure.
they are very cautious to that. And in my contact, for instance, when they let me go into their consciousness, there was a place that I enjoyed it so much because it was like an open. They were like an open book for me, and I could go inside, and I felt immense love in inside their consciousness of them, and that love was very curious for me. I wanted to understand what is that love that they feel, where it came from, what it is. And then I realized that this love that is there in their consciousness is something that they're all aware of, and they understand it as something that is responsible to their existence and my existence, and this big energy is energy of love that give life to everything. Couple of years after that, I realized that the the way we talk about God is related to that feeling that I felt there, to that experience of this wide loving consciousness. But the difference is that when we think about the idea of God, we think about an entity, a certain kind of a being, maybe a big being or an entity. But for them, that God was the existent itself, everything. Like it was very natural and simple for them to know it in a very natural way. Like they know that they are exist because something gave them the ability to exist,
Hmm.
and everything is alive because something holding that, and that was very simple and natural for them, and not like we thinking we believe it, we don't believe it. Now
They're
this,
all branches of the same tree of life, in essence. That they
yeah,
know they're that oneness you talk about. They're all part of the whole, and once you understand that, where do you separate me from you, or us from them? When you finally understand that we're all one part of the whole, each of us. It's like when you do harm to others, you're actually ineffective, harming yourself by default. And
yeah,
I think that's where there's so much division, and we're divide and conquer. The more other even humans or non-humans both, they all have agendas, some good, some bad, but trying to divide people and reject them because they're not like they are. There's differences, and to point those out, and instead of focusing on what we can have in common and come together on, there's too much division trying to sort and separate and causing individuality. And where you don't understand something, there's fear, and the more we don't understand it, the more fear there is. And that's a big part of our human experience, is having to try and reverse that process and learn to trust again,
yeah,
um, and not take on damage ourselves, and willing to take that chance. It's something we have to learn as a species, because we're on the verge of annihilating ourselves with our technology.
Right.
exactly, exactly. And I think that they are totally aware in to that point that you say, because uh, their existence is aware of that love that one is everything, because love in a simple way is the connection between things. Hi, hello Terry. And
You talked about the cow analogy where they put an impression in your mind of what message you thought that they wanted to leave with you for humanity. Can you describe that for us?
yes, they are totally aware of the danger that we are probably inside of, that the what they show me is something similar to many contactees that have probably a very similar experience, and they show it to me a minute before they went and make a circle and disappear. And what they did, it was different from the way before they let me go and be one with their consciousness. When they, in the beginning that we were one, it was all togetherness and having each other consciousness. But when they wanted to show me something, it was different. And what they did, they like showed me a movie that I'm inside of. I suddenly see myself in a field, in a green field, in a beautiful day with a blue sky and trees, green trees, and couple of cows near me eating the grass, and the picture was beautiful. And then suddenly I hear a roar from the horizon, and a big fire came from the horizon and burned everything, and the cows too. And what they did in that vision, like the second before the cows got burned, they looked into my eyes, like made me have to understand that I'm in a way obligated to the nature, to them, and I have to understand that it can happen if I will not take responsibility of is going on. All of us, each one of us, have to get responsibility. And then they gone. And I understood that they show this movie in a very different ways to almost all the contactees that met them and have a communication with them. So they realize that we as a human, in one way, they appreciate us very much because they like realizing that we are beings that live in a physical world that make you very limited in your understanding. So they appreciate that we're willing to do that as a spiritual being that is ready to live in this physical world. And on the other hand, they see that we are like getting to a point of such a amnesia of who we are that we are on the verge of collapsing and hurting ourselves and the nature itself. So they came with visions like that to many people to wake them up, but they don't do it in a force in a very open way, like going down to the showing themselves and say to us, listen, you are ruining your earth. Because if they do that, we're gonna lose our ability to do it in ourselves, that it's connected to our development. If they will come and say all the things that we should know, we're gonna stop developing and we're gonna be robots. So that's why I think they let us to understand bit by bit with many experiences that have different stories and different experiences, so we can combine them and realizing things with ourselves, and in that way we can develop our consciousness. And this is, I think, the main thing that They want us to develop our consciousness.
I've noticed that that is the case in several abduction reports, that they're focusing on our consciousness and our ascendance to a high level of understanding. But I have to say this, in your case, you had a sense of love from them. In other people's cases, abductions, they did not get that. They got an aggressive aggression feeling from the abductees who abducted them. So I think either it's the perception from the human reality as to how they're reacting towards us, or perhaps they're reacting towards us because we're so terrified by their physical appearance that they react in aggressive nature. Tom, did you have an aggressive reaction to your situation?
No, matter of fact, in 1969, which is the experience I talk about most often, it was more of the the off world, how people treated us, and how when we went to friends and family to discuss what happened, how it was, that was more painful than what we experienced. I think when we were part of that experience, our bodies, and we react to things differently. Like if you're watching a horror flick and someone knocks on your window, you're going to be startled or alarmed. But that doesn't necessarily mean, that knock on the window was meant to startle you or to hurt you anyway. So I think that, it was more of a perception, the way our bodies react to things. And, it was something new. It was very different. But in some respects, I was kind of, it was a privilege to be part of something so extraordinary. So it's the way I look at it too. I tried to make the best out of a situation, but I saw something extraordinary. I was part of something extraordinary. Yes, I was scared for a while. My body reacted to it in a certain way. And then later on, when we went to our friends and family at the diner and so on, we kind of realized who our friends were and who they weren't, because, that was, that was a lot for people to accept, certainly back in the 60s and 70s. So, but no, I didn't feel that we were part of something, evil or bad, or something that was going to that was there to hurt us.
Terry, welcome to the show, by the way. Can you hear us now?
Yes, everything.
Okay.
Audio problems to fix.
Okay, Terry, this is Yossi Ronen. He's
Hello, Terry.
from outside of Tel Aviv, Israel. He's been telling a really interesting story that happened to him, where he had face-to-face contact with a green type upright being, and this is what it looked like. Just giving you a little rundown, because I have a question for you. He said that his encounter was pretty much, he felt love. What I want to know is, what did you feel when you were on board the ship, when you were taken on board at Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas?
Yeah, that happened in June of 1977. I felt just abject horror. I was absolutely scared out of my wits. They took us, they didn't exactly invite us in, they took us from a tent while we were camping. And, we were subject to some medical things that had a real clinical feel to them. It didn't feel like a torture session, although some of it was painful. When they were through with us and kicked us out, I was left. I didn't have a sense that they had a deep love of a human being, but I did have a feeling that they may have respected our lives, because they could have taken our lives and they didn't. But I got an overall feeling of being a subject of a science experiment, and not so much a conveyance of love and goodwill. It was pretty much a one-sided exchange. And I had a lot of anger about that. But, over the years, I've kind of softened my stance and thought, had they wished to hurt us, they certainly could have hurt us worse than what they did, or killed us, or taken us somewhere. So Overall,
One other question for you, Terry. Can you describe what you saw as the off-world visitors? What did you see?
sure. I saw a whole lot of the little gray guys. I mean, they're ubiquitous. And the best representation that I can give is on the internet, on YouTube. There's a posting called uh, Bob. What is it?
Oh, Skinny Bob.
Skinny Bob. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, Skinny
Welcome.
Bob. You know, if you turn off the audio, because a bunch of people have copied the video clip and added a bunch of nonsense audio to it. If you just watch, turn off just mute it and just watch. That's pretty much what I saw. It looks a bit taller than what we saw, but as far as the head, the facial features, the movement of muscle, and it just looks spot on to me.
And were they pretty much all the same? Like
They were
they
identical.
came out of a mold?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I had that thought. I didn't think that these were, sentient human beings in the way that you and I are. I felt like they were maybe, some kind of combination of biological material, artificial
Yeah.
intelligence, nanotechnology, who knows? But I felt that they were manufactured. I did not feel like they were. And they were all task oriented. They were all running around doing things.
Do you think they were the ones that were assigned the tasks and there was someone else or some other being controlling them?
Absolutely certain. Well, I can't say I'm certain. I'm certain in my belief. That's my guess. As a matter of fact, in my book, I refer to them as the worker bees. So,
So another hive mind like you suggested, Rob.
Yeah, and it would seem some people think that there's just one type of others or them, or that there's just since 1947 some alien species from far away that finally located our planet, ringing the dinner bell with nuclear blasts that came here, and they're just trying to figure out how to communicate with us and all that. The research and the history both shows that we're not dealing with just one single entity or even faction, and then that there's likely all different orders of types of beings that we've been veiled from, and even factions within those where you can have some similarities of creatures or entities, and some may be benevolent and some malevolent on to either side of the spectrum. And it's kind of a luck of the draw which one you're going to get. You can't predict that on just how they appear alone. You have to go off of how they behave, and that they're even to try that I've been witnessing that want to stop disclosure, and those that are proponents of it. And this seems to have been an age-old struggle that goes back as long as humanity's been able to chalk on cave walls.
Right. Tom, what do you think about this?
Well, again, I've always, for whatever reason, I've always thought that, Earth was our galaxy's arc. I mean, we're alien. I think that after 6 or half dozen global extinctions and having 7 million species here, they're coming from somewhere. And I think someone was just asking about blood types too. 9 members in our family are Rh negative, O negative, and that's pretty rare too. And also O negative blood, which is the universal donor, was also the only blood type tracked by our U.S. government during the years of NOM, because it was the universal donor. And so I think there might be a tie to that. Our experience was definitely, our family's incident was tied to the space race, because we were around all the manufacturing facilities that were working on, capacitors and all, even the goodwill message that was left on the moon, and those guys eating their diner, that kind of thing. So, our situation might be a little bit different than the norm, but as far as one species, no, I think there's, probably hundreds of species. I think we're part alien. We're just too perfect. We've got these. Our Earth rotates on a unique axis. I mean, we can house millions of species simultaneously. We've got brackish water, freshwater, salt water, rainforest. It's the perfect spot to bring life and see that it doesn't go extinct, right? But then again, we've got the issue with water, right? So without good water, we all die. And the whole idea of this arc, if you will, goes, dissolves. I mean, we're all going to die one day. The sun's not going to last forever. We're going to venture out. We're going to go to other planets. So I think that Earth is just one of those probabilities that took place millions of years ago, and we'll probably do that in time ourselves. We'll move on.
Talking about moving on to a different planet and all, when we look for other planets, exoplanets, and things like that, we're always looking for water. But the problem is that's a human viewpoint. If you look at it from the idea that some of these alien races may not exist on water, we could find them in any kind of environment anywhere. So, and that's what I think. What do you think, Yossi?
Well, I think about that. The main thing, maybe, in our trying to understand what they and there is now, there were always been thinking if they are good and bad, good or bad, and maybe they are good creatures, like maybe my experience maybe I had a contact with the good ones, and I felt love, and maybe there are other creatures that they are bad, and this is the reason that other people felt this bad experience. So maybe it's like that. But I think another thing that maybe it should be looking at it in a different perspective. If we look at us as beings that develop in our area to the point of where we are now, our development became to a point that we are on the edge of destruction because of our nuclear power and our way of treating each other. And the only thing that can save us from ourselves is starting to behave and think and differently, and started to be better to each other, to feel more love. And we have to open our consciousness to a wider understanding. Otherwise, we're going to be, finished. We cannot stand this too much. So if you compare it to, if this is the way things developed, and you say that there are creatures from different places, like different stars, that developing like us, and they probably got to that point too. And if they survive to develop in such a fascinating way that we saw them, and they can come here and they do these physical wonders, they probably survived this point and got beyond this limit of being good or bad. They can survive. They probably survived because they understand that they can survive only if they are in a good attention to life. So that's why I think there is no reason to be afraid from them.
Yeah, Terry, do you feel there's a reason to be afraid of them?
I do, for the reason that, Rob, I think you touched on this. When I described the grays that I saw in my book, I had dozens of people contact me and say, "Oh, you got that totally wrong. They don't look like that. They look like this. They look like," And I think that bolsters your argument. There are probably hundreds, maybe thousands, who knows? But there are a lot of different entities out there. And, if you're dealing with just say 100 entities, what are the odds that one or two are going to be at odds with the other? So you're going to have conflict there. And what are the odds that we're going to draw 100 good ones?
Yeah.
So I think it's very likely that there's good and bad out there, just like there are in human beings.
Well, that's what the idea too, that they're living beings, that they're not manufactured, which we also touched on that earlier too. So
Right.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
there's a
lot of
somebody has to be
variables.
around to manufacture the ones that are manufactured.
Yeah.
Well,
We don't know. Could we be dealing with AI?
Yeah, probably.
but it show the AI could have outlived its progenitors that created them. They could have outlived if they were sent across the galaxy or even created here. The growing consensus with scientists is that probably nothing originated on Earth as far as organic life, and that everything was seeded here at one point or another.
Yeah.
And that the ancient history shows that there's been we go through catastrophes about every 3,000 years on average. That puts us near the brink of extinction. This last 5,000 years has been the longest run of humanity that hasn't been set back to the brink of extinction. That's allowed us to advance to an industrial age, and it's the first time on this planet that's ever occurred, because there's no chemical trace going back hundreds of millions of years to exhibit there was ever another industrial age that could have created the kind of technologies that we're seeing. And even the most ancient mythologies and religions talk about how that humans became problematic, and with and other entities with their technologies that was becoming a endangerment to the planet. And then there were differences of opinions of how they wanted to resolve that issue. So I think there lays some potential danger if obviously it appears at least some of their home too here on this planet, and they don't care if we destroy ourselves. But I seriously doubt, with this beautiful oasis of a planet that we have in the near galaxy arm, it's just filled with a bunch of barren rocks. They don't want to let that get destroyed, because they don't want to intervene, and it would in essence destroy their home here as well. Um, and they wouldn't have gone through all this trouble to create an oasis, such beauty and diversity, just to let any species destroy it arbitrarily when they have the means to do something about it. And what kind of steps would they choose to take to resolve that? That's anyone's guess. We don't know. There is inherent danger in that. If we don't change our ways and be better stewards of this planet, we're going to annihilate ourselves. We really don't have to worry about them potentially doing it. We're going to do it to ourselves if we don't change this.
Although that might be one of the reasons why they've been hanging around nuclear power plants, nuclear
Exactly.
arsenals, nuclear warships, and nuclear bombs on planes, because they're really either interested in our advancement of technology in a bad way, and they want to indicate to us by turning on missiles and turning them off, hey, look, we can destroy you at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can destroy yourself, so don't do that. It's kind of like a slap on the hand saying, look, you're going the wrong way.
Yes.
So, Yossi, any last comments?
Well, there is a lot to open in this subject. It's really only touching the surface. If we want really to understand all the picture of that contact, I didn't think about a sentence for the ending of the conversation.
Closing statements.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, it's great having you, by the way.
I'll tell you what, we'll get back to you on that. Terry, I know you came in late, but any closing comments that you would like to make?
Yeah, I would just like to say thanks to Yossi. You have a great story. I'm familiar with it. If I could just real quick ask, are you familiar with Haim Eshed?
Not personally, but he's a really known person in Israel. He's
Yes, I
really
read an article in the Jerusalem Press maybe 2 years ago
yeah
that he made a statement that there is a galactic federation, his words,
yeah
galactic federation in the United States and Russia, China, were all members of this galactic federation.
yeah.
And I was just curious
We
if you had an opinion of that one way or another.
well, we all in Israel here was shocked from his statement and his book that he wrote.
Yes.
And the thing is that in Israel there is still, I think, there is still uh, hiding that subject. I think that here in Israel there are people that knows a lot. Maybe I don't know, but I mean, very fast after he published his book, there were a couple of TV programs that talking about him, and they are very fast. I mean, the main news and that made a little bit laugh of what he said.
Yeah.
I mean, they made the joke of it,
Right.
and but there were people that say he was serious and this is real. And it's only in Israel, it's only the beginning of talking about that. There is a lot of hiding of that.
So you still have the stigma there in Israel in regards to talking and speaking on the phenomenon.
Yeah, that's why. That's the reason that I did write the book for many years. It took me, I think, 25 or 30 years to finish that book, and I wrote it in Hebrew, but I didn't have the courage to publish it in Hebrew, and I published it in English 1.5 years ago, and only now I'm going to do it in English, in Hebrew. It's going to be published in Hebrew next month, I think.
This is the book he's in reference to right now that he has written. One, Face-to-Face Contact and Human Consciousness as Evolution. A true story by Yossi Ronen. Check it out. It's available on Amazon. Get your copy, read it, and join the journey with Yossi. Okay, Rob, any last comments?
Just I look forward to speaking with you all more on this topic. It's fascinating to get to know you. Both you guys, well, three of you I haven't spoken with before. Yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation because, as he said, we're just barely scratching the surface of it.
Yeah.
So,
Tom,
Yeah.
any last comments?
Well, there were a couple people chimed in. One had said about the technology that we should be much further ahead than we are. And I think in a lot of respects, he's right or she's right. But then again, we're not privy to all the technology that we are working on either. So it's really hard to say where we are today. Someone else had asked if I had a radio show or a blog show, Interspace TV, which now is really a part of the UFO Man. And for Yossi over here, it was a pleasure speaking with you, Terry. I hope to speak with you again. Rob, very interesting points. And Tim, thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome.
Yeah.
And we want to
Thank
thank Yossi Ronen for coming this evening and spending his valuable time with us. Thank you, Yossi.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks to everybody on the panel. Thanks to everybody that watched online and participated in the chat room. And from all of us, good afternoon. Have a great day, and we'll see you next Saturday. Take care.
Bye.